Hello and welcome to the Beatles Zone. Just 5 days after writing From Me to You on the 5th of March, the Beatles were at EMI Studios recording it. It would eventually end up as an A-side and the third single. From Me to You was originally intended to be the B-side of the original choice Thank You Girl, which in turn became the B-side. Although the album Please Please Me was awaiting release on the 22nd of March, From Me to You would be a standalone single. George Martin explained this policy.
We sort of worked out a game plan once we had a succession of hits, and we said we'd try and do 4 singles a year, maybe a couple of albums a year. But the albums, we would try and give people as good value for money as possible. So we crammed generally about 14 titles onto an album, and the album was completely fresh. So we reasoned that if we put a single on the album, we'd be giving people short measure because they already got it.
The title for From Me to You had at first confused John Lennon as to where he'd gotten it from. It wasn't until he'd picked up a copy of the New Musical Express to find out how the Beatles were placed in the chart that he put 2 and 2 together. It had been inspired by the New Musical Express's letters column titled From You to Us. The title, of course, fit in well with the personal feel of the past singles. I suppose that is why we often have the words you and me in the titles of our songs. It's the kind of thing that helps the listeners to identify with the lyrics. We think this is very important. The fans like to feel that they're part of something that is being done by the performers. Paul McCartney has said in his book The Lyrics, "After writing that, I remember thinking, now we're getting somewhere." The March 5th sessions are also interesting because the group laid down a recording of One After 909, which was deemed unsatisfactory at the time, and it wouldn't be until the Let It Be album that a new recording was utilized. 1963's One After 909 did eventually see the light of day on the Beatles Anthology album. Many years before Free as a Bird, the Beatles became the Threetles when, on Tuesday the 12th of March, at Granada Cinema, Bedford, John Lennon was absent due to a heavy cold. Songs in the set were rearranged so that George and Paul could take over Lennon's vocal lines. This state of affairs unfortunately carried over to the 13th, when the Beatles were back in the studio working on overdub sessions for Thank You Girl. Luckily, the still voiceless Lennon's vocals weren't needed for the session, but it still meant he'd missed that evening's show at the Rialto in York. The 14th of March was a busy one for George Martin at EMI Studios as he set about the mixing of From Me to You, in both mono and stereo. Meanwhile, the Beatles were travelling south from York to Wolverhampton. It was to be another show without John Lennon. But there was good news the following day when he was deemed fit to get back into the action at Colston Hall in Bristol. On Sunday, the 24th of March, legendary photographer Dezo Hoffman spent time with the Beatles in a return to Liverpool. The shoots produced numerous stills and 8mm footage of the Beatles having fun around the city. So we've had some important highlights in March 1963. I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.